Hey everyone, welcome to my first vlog. We're going to keep it light and we're going to talk about women in combat roles. So the Army, I think all the services actually, are going through a pretty big push and are on, looks like, the cusp of allowing women to do combat roles. And I have a question about how the country might handle that on the other side of fully integrating women into combat roles. Now, I know there's a lot of talk about, oh, what if physical fitness standards or proficiency standards are lowered for women? And there's been a lot of women going through traditionally male military courses, like the Marine officer course and Ranger School. Actually, the first two women ever to have graduated Ranger School did so recently. And I have thoughts about all that, but regardless, that's not the point I want to. Those aren't the points I want to make, or the points that I'm thinking of. My question is, and actually, I first heard this point from my drill sergeant when I went to basic training in 2001. That was a long time ago. He said women would never be in combat roles because the American public could not handle mass amounts of women casualties in war. Not the same way that they can handle, mass casualties and injuries and all that stuff when it comes to men. And that's a very interesting point. I haven't thought about it in a long time. But when I saw the article about the two women passing Ranger School and the push by the different branches to get women into combat roles more predominantly, it got the juices flowing, and somehow that thought got pushed to the forefront. I think, and as of right now, 98% of combat deaths are men. And obviously, that's because men make up all the specific combat jobs and do most of the combat missions. And there are people out there that have argued that women should be allowed into more combat roles because they're already fighting next to men in these theaters. And that's on its face, that's kind of true. But like I just said, 98% of combat casualties and deaths are of men. So while women are in combat zones and some are on convoys going through dangerous areas, and there are women getting injured, but they are in the significant minority of it. So using the argument that women should be in combat or should be allowed in combat roles because they already are is a little inflated. I'm sorry, I got on a tangent. But yeah, so let's fast forward 10, 15 years. Women are fully integrated into the infantry, into armor, into the engineers. I can't remember exactly if the engineers are co-ed or not. Hell, women are in Ranger Battalion and they're in SF. And let's, for the sake of argument, imagine that the United States is continuing wars in the Middle East like they have in the last 10 years, 15 years. And now there's a noticeable uptick in body counts of women. Now, how would society react to that? It's a really good question because there has been a really big push recently to argue that there's no real significant difference between men and women, even though there obviously is physically and mentally. But everybody can say things like, "Oh, men and women are equal and they can do the same jobs and they can have the same skill and they can have the same strengths." But when the rubber hits the road and women are dying in similar numbers to men in combat theaters, how will people react? How would the average citizen or society as a whole react to this kind of thing? Do you think there would be a significant backlash? Do you think that maybe there would be a push to reduce military adventurism and foreign policy that puts troops on the ground in a lot of different places and conducts, 2 wars at a time in 2 different theaters, occupying 2 different countries? That's a good question. I don't have the answer. I have no clue. I feel like that might change the national, dialogue about it. But it's a really hard question because right now, I guess technically the wars are over and we don't have the same number of troops in Afghanistan and Iraq, and they're not conducting combat operations at any level near what they were. But let's say at the height of the war, when we have hundreds of soldiers being killed and injured, let's imagine that almost half of them are women. Does that affect how people feel about the war, or would feel about a war? And that's a really good question. I don't have the answer. It's a really curious thing because I think it's pretty obvious that society as a whole is a little more, or a lot more, indifferent, or not indifferent, but like tolerant of men dying in war. And I wonder if that would be the same case if women experience similar casualties in conflicts that the U.S. gets involved in. So, yeah, that's my question. I don't have a real answer. I feel that it would be different and in the direction of being more careful to getting into conflicts, but I would not fight to assert that as the true answer. But yeah, if you have any, what do you guys think? Would women being inserted into more combat roles and as a result dying more often in conflicts, would that make the U.S. government soften its foreign policy as far as putting more troops into harm's way? And I know that in the future, technology might reduce the need for troops on the ground because we already have a lot of drone warfare that can cover ground and blow shit up. But nothing really replaces boots on the ground. And so for this question, let's stick with that and kind of ignore any futuristic robots that might be doing the fighting for us. Let's just stick to people on the ground in these conflicts. But yeah, that's just the thought I had. So thanks for listening.